Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. It's Tuesday, February 10th, and what I want to talk about today is something called shifting trends and discrediting and losing. What I'm seeing now is a shift in the trend where the Western narrative and the Western attempts at maintaining hegemony are fraying, let's put it that way. And this is all, I think this is a good thing. So I'm going to be talking about ICE. I'm going to be talking about the Epstein files. I'm going to be talking about the war in Ukraine and Netanyahu back in Washington, and even U.S. Olympians are distancing themselves from the United States government, that's pretty extraordinary. And finally, I'll be talking a little bit about the fact that there was this assassination attempt of a Russian general, very, very high-ranking Russian general, apparently in violation of international law since he was acting as a negotiator. And there's a kind of a decades, actually it's a millennial-long rule of civilized society that you don't kill negotiators and emissaries and envoys and people of that nature. And lo and behold, somebody tried to do it. So let's get into it. First of all, I've been quite concerned about the reports coming out of Minnesota and other cities in the United States. And, Trump portrayed ICE as these heroes who are bringing law and order back to the cities of the U.S. I'm thinking, could the American people be that stupid that they actually believe this thuggery that's been going on? Well, it turns out that I just checked on there's a poll called the Marist poll. This is another polling organization. I'll be reading what it says here. It says 6 in 10 Americans, that's 60%, disapprove of the job ICE is doing. 33% approve. The Democrats, 91% overwhelmingly disapprove of the agency's performance, and 66% of independents agree. Nearly 3 in 4 Republicans, though, approve of how ICE is doing its job, which may be, no, I won't go into characterizing what that indicates about Republicans versus Democrats. Nevertheless, in any case, it says 6 in 10 Americans think the demonstrations around the country to oppose the actions of ICE are mostly legitimate protests. And I covered this earlier, where Trump was saying that the immigrants are a big problem and they're criminals and so on and so forth. The data just doesn't indicate, it indicates the exact opposite. So this is another example of President Trump completely discrediting himself. Anything that comes out of his mouth, you actually absolutely cannot believe. Now, the next topic is the Epstein files. And, there have been rumors, you could say, of abuses going on back decades. Actually, back in the after 9/11, I'll say, after 9/11, there was a guy named, I think it was Fred Gunderson, who was with the FBI, and he had reported that Boys Town, which is a famous, it was a place for orphan boys to raise them and help them get ahead, and they were being sent to the White House, to be sexually abused. But that went under the table and nobody ever heard about it. But the situation with the Epstein files, it's become so, it's become unavoidable. You can't, as much as Trump tries to dismiss it and the people in positions of power try to dismiss it, it's impossible to do that. So this is an article from Middle East Eye, and I've got the links here in following the video. And it talks about the criminal elite are exposed with the Epstein files. And nearly 2 decades ago, it became clear that Jeffrey Epstein was a predator. In recent years, it has become impossible to maintain the idea that he was a moral outlier. He distilled and channeled through depraved forms of sexual gratification, a wider corrupt culture that believes rules don't apply to special people, to the chosen, to the Übermensch. For those of you who aren't aware, Übermensch is a Nazi term that characterizes their own superior genetic and moral and intellectual and every other way superiority. That's how they think of themselves. But obviously, to any normal person, the behavior of these peoples is completely horrific. And it's also significant, the fact that somebody raised the question, is Vladimir Putin, is he on the Epstein list? Is Xi Jinping is he on the Epstein list? All the people, all the bad people are not on the Epstein list, and all the good people who say they're good and say the other people who are bad and are not on the Epstein list, they're on the Epstein list. If you can follow my train of thought here, the point being that the people who've told you that they're the good guys are on the Epstein list, doing and participating in all these terrible things. It's the sexual abuse is only the tip of the iceberg. It's far worse and frankly satanic. And I just saw that Sergei Lavrov, who was the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, just used the word satanic, and it does appear to be that way. It's like killing, stealing, sexual exploitation. These are the kinds of things that normal spiritual practices or religions all they oppose that. And yet it seems that there's this like cult-like group of people who think that this is the real morality, and this is how you make lots and lots of money and elevate yourself above the rest of humanity. And the vast majority of humanity, even within the United States, recognizes this is not just an aberration, but it's criminal and it's horrible. So the fact that that these files are becoming available is discrediting the entire U.S. and European political class. That's the key point here. When they completely lose the legitimacy in the eyes of the population, puts them in a very, very vulnerable position, and that's where things can possibly change dramatically. Let's hope so. The next thing is that this whole controversy about Iran. And Trump is really great at, he says, we've got the greatest armada in the history of the universe, and his, what's her name, Carolyn Levitt, she gets up there and she says, we've got the greatest Navy in the history of the world, and we're going to, we're telling Iran, you better watch out or else, it's going to go bad for you. And Iran is saying, okay, so let's look at this. You're telling us that we have to get rid of our nuclear generation possibility, in other words, to refine uranium so that it can be used for peaceful purposes. And you're telling us that we can't do that anymore, even though the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty says that we can. International law says we can. And you're telling us that we have to get rid of our missiles, which are what we use to protect ourselves in case of an attack. So you're telling us we should rely on your moral authority and bullying to get rid of the ability for us to defend ourselves. And guess what? We're not going to do that. And Trump says, well, you better be careful, because if you don't do what we tell you to do, but bad things are going to happen to you. And Iran is just saying, you know what? Sorry, we're not going to do that. And by the way, Trump also says, ditch your friends and allow your what can I say, mortal enemy Israel to dictate the terms to you and bring your country down. And in fact, even foment mass riots which kill several thousand people, all in the name of regime change, which is what you really want. Regime change is the geopolitical equivalent of a parasitic organism taking over your organs and destroying you from the inside. And that's basically what Israel wants. That's how it functions. And Iran, to its credit, is after years of trying to be conciliatory, has finally said no more. So that's that, and it looks like now tomorrow. This is Tuesday, February 10th. Tomorrow, Netanyahu is going to go to Washington, and we don't know what's going to go on in that meeting, but there's a lot of controversy whether Trump will be able to stand up to these people, because if Trump does decide to attack Iran because of Iran's intransigence for not putting up with his threats, Iran may bring a big surprise to the Israelis and to all the military bases and U.S. assets in the Middle East. So this is a very, very pivotal moment right now. So I don't know where that's going, but we are at a real tipping point here, because I think of this crisis that the United States and Israel have cooked up in the Middle East. Now, the next thing is the topic of Ukraine. And, recently I saw a video on YouTube where this woman, I don't know who she is or whether the video is fake or real, but she's saying, Russia is losing. They're losing thousands of people. Ukraine is winning. And she went on and on for about 20 minutes. But you have somebody, a known person, John Mearsheimer, who is he's a professor who believes in he's the realist school. So yes, he is oriented towards the Western mindset, but he at least is willing to look at reality. And I've included a video. It's rather long. It's about 30 minutes long, but starting at about the 12-minute point, he says Ukraine is losing this war. And I was just before I got on this recording, I was watching an interview that Larry Johnson had with the former Prime Minister of Ukraine named Azarov, and he was saying, and I've said this myself in terms of my own past research, that when the Soviet Union broke up and Ukraine became independent, it had a population of around 52 million. It had a significant industrial base and so on. And Azarov is saying, and I, from my own independent research, I would have to agree with him, that they've lost most of their industry. Their population is down to 20 million. So from 52 million to 20 million now. This is 1991 that the Ukraine became independent. Now it's 2026. That's 35 years later, something like that. And Ukraine is basically disappearing from the map demographically, and militarily it's losing. There's Andrei Macharov suggests that according to the data that's available, at least close to 2 million people have died on the battlefield, and possibly 3 million if all are counted. I have a friend in one of the major cities, and she says there's hardly any men on the street. Why? They're either in hiding, because if they are caught on the street, they'll be sent to the front and face almost certain death, or they're injured, or they're dead, or they're gone. So this whole venture that the United States, they thought they were going to be able to bring the Russian Federation down so that they could get their hands on its resources and get rid of the primary anti-imperialist country in the world, which is Russia. And even though Russia is a big country, it has 140 plus ethnic groups, but they all have their languages and they're allowed to keep their culture. And the proof is in the pudding. The African countries are asking the Russians to come in to get rid of the terrorist problem, which was created by the Europeans to destabilize them. So this is another example of how the whole tide is turning. Things are shifting away from Western hegemony. This is a quote from Netanyahu. This is the seventh meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. And it says the announcement came a day after talks in Oman between Tehran and Washington, which both sides describe as positive, as further negotiations are expected, even as both countries prepare for possible escalation. Originally, this meeting was scheduled for February 18th, but Netanyahu is this a logistical issue? Is he worried about Iran becoming too powerful for the United States and Israel to take on, and so they need to be attacked as soon as possible? Or is it something which I consider, which is at the core issue, which is that Netanyahu is a visceral war addict. He thrives on killing people, and he just can't get enough of it. And so he's off to Washington. Please, please, Trump, kill more people. Kill more people. That's the end. And remember all that money we gave you. And don't forget those Epstein tapes, which I can tell everybody what you were actually doing there. So you can't discount that possibility either. So we don't know what's going to be going on in that meeting tomorrow, but wanted to bring that to your attention. And moving on here, even I remember in 1968, I think it was at the Olympics. This was at the height of the civil rights movement, and I think there were 3 African American athletes who had won, like the golds, at least one, I think the gold medal for something, and possibly the silver medal as well. But it might have been 3 of them, and they all raised their fist in a Black Panther salute, saying, we're for civil rights, and we don't like what the U.S. government is doing to the African American people. And people who were shocked about this. And then you had the case of that the football player whose name escapes me, who refused to. What was it? I forget exactly what happened, but he refused to recite the U.S. national anthem. I think that's what it was, because of the racial discrimination against African Americans. And but now you have 3 white-skinned, red-blooded Americans at the U.S. Olympics, and they're all saying, we don't really agree with everything the U.S. government is doing. And this is an astounding development, because the Olympics are supposed to be non-political, but the fact that the matter is that you have U.S. Olympians who are even saying, well, we don't agree with what Trump is doing. We don't agree with these kind of racist attacks on immigrants and so on. And we just need to speak up about it. So that is a major cultural shift, I would say, in the United States, when you have people not just out in the streets, but these are people who have a public voice, and they're talking about these issues. That's a good sign that culturally the United States may be shifting in a positive direction. And finally, there was this case of the attempted assassination of this Russian general who was involved in negotiations, either as a support person or was involved directly. He had actually done negotiations back in 2022, when the Azov battalion, which is a Nazi battalion, was cornered in Azovstal, which is in Mariupol, the city of Mariupol. It was a big steel plant that they were using as a kind of a hideout and fortress. And the Russians, basically encircled them and got them to surrender. And this general, Alexeyev, I think his name is, was negotiating to, tell them, you're going to die or you can give up. And they chose to give up. But he was shot 3 times in the stomach, I think it was, and he nearly died. There were 3 people involved in planning this assassination. It's incredible that the Russian Federation was able to capture them on video, CCTV cameras, or at least one of them, and then through association was able to find out who the other two are. One of them is back in Ukraine. Another one was captured, but the question arises: is this a Ukrainian thing, or is it somebody else who's involved? And it turns out there's one source that I go to called Borzikman says that the CIA was involved, and the reason why you say that is because the Ukrainian intelligence services have been basically taken over by the CIA following the coup in 2014. But nevertheless, there are other countries like Poland, for example, which the evidence indicates that Poland may have been involved in the assassination attempt in terms of planning or financing it, whatever. So this is an example where they attempt to kill somebody, they fail, and they're able to trace it back to who is the real culprit. So these is all a series of events that I've been following. There's a lot of things going on here. It's a very volatile, very unpredictable situation. We don't really know where it's going to go because war is unpredictable, and there's we have Gaza, which is still a problem. There's a lot of evil people in the world causing a lot of trouble, but the good people seem to be fighting back. So that's the main point that I want to make here. And I just want to thank you all for listening into my discussion of these topics. And you can support my channel by liking it or sharing it, or becoming a member of Substack, or you can buy one of my information billboard T-shirts. I call them. This is one of them. I don't know if this is one of them. This may be not quite as popular, but it's more graphic. It says "Question Everything." So that's my model here. You can see that I've changed the name of my channel to "Question Everything," because when you question, that is the door out of the matrix, so to speak. That is the way that we are able to see through the narrative that we're fed on a daily basis. You have to question everything. Is that really true? Do some fact checking, which you have to go really deep to find out what's actually going on and who benefits. So question everything. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.